Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking, featuring the newest champion. And for the first time with Events 2.0, instead of a reworked champion, we have another new champion. 2 for 1, baby. This is where we'll break down their mechanics and place them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game. Before we dive in, throwing in that little shameless reminder to those of you watching, I'm streaming on Twitch. We've done a lot with idle champions, and we've already knocked out Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3, and had a fun little birthday stream playing games with chat. I guess she's the streamer now. We also have a Tyredack Discord up and running. Check the description if you want to jump in there. Though keep in mind, this is a Tyredack community Discord, so we're talking about more than just idle champions. Though there is plenty of talk about that as well. If you're catching this video when I released it, I'm probably streaming right now. Stop in and say hi. We'll be talking about these champions today on stream. But let's get into them here, shall we? Let's start with the first of the 2 new champions. Umberto, the lawful good human druid in Seat 7. He serves the group as a tank, support, and debuff champion. His main attack will change depending on his ultimate, which will transform him into a bear for 15 seconds. And when activated, will reset the base attack cooldown of all champions in the formation. For the duration, his attack becomes a melee attack, landing 1 ultimate hit of damage when he attacks, and reduces the attack cooldown of all champions in the formation by 2 seconds. The base attack outside of being transformed by his ultimate is actually a magic-based attack, so we have another magic-based tank joining the ranks of Blushi and Miria. With it, he unleashes a small swarm of angry bees at the nearest foe, dealing 1 hit of damage and interacting with one of his formation abilities, adding a swarming bee to the enemy after the damage is applied, so keep that in mind. His main source of damage buffing comes from Detective's Entourage, where he increases the damage of all champions in the 2 columns behind him by the standard base of 100%. This is increased in multiple ways, one of which is another formation ability in Ongoing Investigation. This is a time-based mechanic, where you will pick one of 3 different ways to gather clues. Each clue stack increases Detective's Entourage by 50%, stacking multiplicatively. Clue stacks cap at 100. These will persist for the current adventure and reset when you finish it. Now, those of you familiar with Karlach's DPS specialization will be familiar with this formula. A 100 stack at a 50% multiplier. A total maximum buff base of 4.06 E19%. Pretty huge, and it has a gear slot tied to it to scale it even further. There is a lot to unpack here though, because there is a huge but. These time mechanics are very restrictive. You will pick between either gaining 10 stacks right away, lasting for 2 hours, but all but one of them are removed after those 2 hours. Or for 8 hours you will gain 1 stack after every 2 hours, and an additional 2 stacks when it ends, for a total of 6 stacks for 8 hours. Or for 24 hours, an entire day, 1 stack for every 3 hours, plus 16 stacks when it ends, for a total of 24. That means a maximum of 24 stacks per day. So a total of 100 is pretty far out of reach, meaning generally you're gonna take the easy 10 and push to the end of your run. But there are a few ways to capitalize on the max stack, which is going to make for some crazy numbers. First of all, you can use time acceleration to make this go faster. That means if using potions, the speed core, shandy, etc., you will make it complete in less real-life time. How often are you going to be doing this? Not very often at all. But if you do, it will be an insane buff. You might do this if you know you're going to do a run where you'd normally hit a wall and you want to push past it, or keep him in a background party to stack it up passively for when you might want to switch over to it. With just the base 10 stacks, we're talking an average buff. But if you're willing to push it to the max with that time sink, we're talking potentially the best positional buff in the game, because we're not even done buffing Detective's Entourage yet. But let's take a break on that and focus on his debuff. With Beehive Barrage, every second his staff will spawn a bee, up to a maximum of 10. When an enemy attacks Umberto, he unleashes a bee from the staff onto the enemy. When an enemy with a bee is hit by any champion, all the bees, a maximum of 5 applied to an enemy, sting them for 1 second of bud damage for each bee. Bees will last on an enemy until they are defeated or if Umberto is removed from the formation. Don't forget he also applies a bee with his base attack while not transformed by his ultimate. This is a good source of bud damage and will serve as some extra armor breaking for the team. He also has proper health share as a tank with protective presence, where he grants 25% of his maximum health to all other champions, and increases any healing they receive by the same amount. Now onto his specializations. He has 2 sets of options, the first being the other way he increases Detective's entourage. As we go over this first set of specs, keep in mind, they are multiplicative and will scale with gear and scale with the pre-stack. Law's Alliance will increase the effect of Detective's entourage by 125% for each lawful champion in the formation. Family of Orphans will increase it by 100% for each unaffiliated champion in the formation. And Call of the Wardens will increase it for each Ranger or Druid champion in the formation by 300%. So pick whichever your formation will scale best with. For quick reference, with base numbers before gear, Family of Orphans with a full 10 champions qualifying would be a 1.02E5. Law's Alliance starts beating that out at 9 stacks with a 1.47E5, and Call of the Wardens beats a 9 stack of Law's Alliance at 7 with a 1.6E5. And remember, these scale with the pre-stack, so this will scale well. The second set of specialization options is a choice between his 3 main formation abilities. More bees will make Beehive Barrage increase the number of swarming bees spawned each second to 5 per second, and when an enemy hits Umberto, the maximum number of bees, if available, are unleashed, and the damage per bee is increased by 100%. With more clues, he will increase the maximum stack cap of Ongoing Investigation by 50% to a maximum of 150, so that means a higher multiplicative stack cap on that potential insane buff, but it will take more time to complete. Or more damage, increasing the effect of Detective's entourage by a flat 200%. His equipment is very good. 1 for all damage, 1 for his health to be a proper tank, 1 for Detective's entourage, 1 for Ongoing Investigation, 1 for his first set of specializations, and remember this is the pre-stack, and finally 1 for ultimate cooldown. Very good scaling to be had here. The feats are really good too. One of them tied to his event rewards will help a lot with Ongoing Investigation. Flat adding 40 stacks, not to the cap, but registering as 40 automatically completed, granting you a rather large boost right away, and helping you reach a higher stack quicker. So reaching that potential cap of 150 doesn't look so daunting. And remember, we're looking at a 50% multiplier, stacking up to 150 times. So a baseline buff of 2.6E28 before any gear scaling. If you just take the initial 10, with this feat adding 40, for a total of 50, you're looking at a 6.3E10 bonus before gear scaling. So not too bad, but still quite far off from its maximum potential. His achievement isn't terrible and will happen over time while using him, requiring you to unleash 10,000 bees with his Beehive Barrage ability. Now let's break down his adventure variants real quick. For all of them, he cannot be moved or removed from your formation. The first should be easy for anyone, as those receiving his Detective's entourage are the only ones that can deal damage. You'll want your DPS receiving it anyway while being forced to use him. The second will take 2 slots in your formation, which is a bit rough, but the NPCs that take up a slot do assist with his investigations, allowing you to complete that ongoing investigation faster to compensate. The third will only allow those who match his first specialization option, lawful, unaffiliated, and druid/ranger champions. There are quite a few champions who fit these descriptions, but depending on your unlocked roster, this could be a heavy restriction. Now what about his availability? Naturally, he will only be locked out of the Day 1 Dexterity lockout for trials, and doesn't have the intelligence naturally for the Strahd patron. However, he does have an intelligence feat to counter that in his event rewards. So with that feat, available for all patrons, and only 1 Day 1 lockout. Pretty good. Now there is the question of who he works with. He's not a DPS, but does have a potentially powerful positional for Artemis to observe, but he shares a seat with Jim, one of the best positional DPS in the game for Artemis. With that positional, he's easily usable with Warduke, but doesn't have the strength and is not evil for Krond. Human is not good for Ashara, and isn't a class for Black Viper to benefit from. Birdsong or Crux, if you happen to be using them, could fit right in with his specializations, and they're all unaffiliated. He does not have a Ceramorphosis for Dirge, and Karlach does not fit any of his specialization options. So there is some back and forth here. After Esmeralda, as a debuffer, he is primed to be used in a debuff team if we ever get a debuff-based DPS. As far as his ranking, he's a bit weird. With that ongoing investigation, he has such a crazy high ceiling. But how often are you going to utilize that peak? Well, really, realistically, not that often. But even not considering that, he still has a pre-stack scaling to that positional through specializations. He's a magic-based proper tank, which is rare, and has good availability. Overall, I'm putting him in the A-, with that asterisk of, if you happen to be able to reach that peak of ongoing investigation, he's in the top of A+, breaching into the S. He just can't get that peak often enough to fully rank him based on that. Now we have to dive into the other entire brand new champion. Sheesh. So let's talk about Aeon, the lawful evil Goliath, Artificer Bard in Seat 10. She serves the group as a support and debuff champion. Sensing a theme lately? Her attacks are quite simple. Counting as a ranged attacker, she will fire an energy bolt from her cane at the closest enemy for a single hit. Her ultimate will have her command her mechanical monkey to fire a barrage at all enemies, dealing one hit to each and knocking them back a short distance. Aeon has unique interactions specifically with patrons, made evident by her network of espionage, where every week she targets one patron for infiltration, where she will become usable in any adventure or variant for that patron for that week, regardless of restrictions. So if you're struggling with some patron variants and she's picked for that patron, it's time to get to work. This is important for her formation abilities as well, as with Inner Circle, her main source of damage buffing, she will increase the damage of adjacent champions for each champion in the formation that is eligible for the patron she is infiltrating for the week, stacking multiplicatively based on the pre-stack. So as long as you have a full team slotted of champions available for her network of espionage, this will stack up quite well. This works like Dadius in that while it stacks with the pre-stack, the gear tied to it only increases the post-stack. There is an option to increase the pre-stack with her specializations, but there's no way to scale the pre-stack with equipment. This is also increased by Challenge Accepted, where she will increase the effective Inner Circle for each completed patron challenge for the patron selected by Network of Espionage, stacking multiplicatively, and similarly stacking with the pre-stack, but like Inner Circle, the gear slot tied to it scales the post-stack, and again, there is an option to scale it in the specializations, but not with equipment. The cap here will be 8, as there are 8 challenges per week for every patron. One downside and possible issue for this is Trials lockouts. As in my case right now, I have Celeste locked out for my Trials team. Well, my Mert requires Celeste, so I can't complete one of the patron challenges to get the maximum effect from Mert. Jarlaxle and Makos are often locked out for a lot of people, and both are commonly seen in patron challenges. I hope this in some way gets looked into, though I'd assume it's a bit of a challenge, I'm sure, because it doesn't feel good being locked out of a formation ability's maximum effect just because of game mechanics I don't have control over. Trials are on their own timer separate from patron resets and when network espionage will change, so it's not like you can plan to line it up and make sure you complete the challenge first. There will be a brief period where you're able to sneak it in each week, but I don't feel that's the intention here. Now let's talk about her debuff, Uncover Weakness, where each enemy she damages gains a Stolen Secrets stack. Enemies with a stack take more damage from all sources, stacking multiplicatively up to 5 times. And yes, yet again, this will scale with the pre-stack. However, this one does have a gear slot tied to it to scale the pre-stack. But with a maximum of 5 stacks, we're not talking anything crazy. If you're familiar with Presto, her debuff is very similar to his. Now what about her specializations? Like Umberto, she has 2 different selections. The first, which is how she buffs her inner circle even further, and the second choice is how she increases her inner circle even further beyond. First, you will choose either Immediate Infiltration, which will increase inner circle by 100% each time her debuff, Uncover Weakness, applies a stack, stacking additively up to 10 times per area and resetting when you change areas. Or Play the Long Game, where she will increase the effective inner circle by 0.1% each time Uncover Weakness applies a Stolen Secret stack, stacking additively up to 1 million times, and persisting until you reset the adventure. Play the Long Game is equal to Immediate Infiltration after you've debuffed 10,000 times in the adventure. And then it just gets better than that from there. So if you're going to be in an adventure long enough to debuff that many times or more, it is superior. The second set of specializations picks between Artificer's Arsenal, which makes her base attack Pierce, dealing 1 hit to all enemies in a line, dealing 5 seconds of Bud base damage to all enemies hit, but also allows her to apply her debuff to multiple targets at a time. Spy Network, which makes Inner Circle now affect all champions within 2 slots of her, and will increase that pre-stack nature by 75%. Or Powerful Patronage, where she will increase the pre-stack effect of Challenge Accepted by 150% while on a patron variant for the week's chosen patron. So a boost to her debuff, a flat boost to her inner circle, and an extra boost when you're on a patron variant. Now let's dive into her equipment, which is overall decent. 1 for all champ damage, 1 for inner circle, 1 for uncover weakness. Remember, this is the one with the pre-stack scaling. 1 for challenge accepted, 1 for her first set of specializations, and 1 for ultimate cooldown. So to reiterate, as far as equipment goes, she only scales the pre-stack of her debuff. Her achievement is also rather simple, just requiring you to gain 10,000 stacks of Stolen Secrets. It will happen rather quickly as long as you're actively using her and applying her debuff. The adventure variants will make it so she cannot be moved or removed in any of them, and the first will make it so only champions adjacent to her can deal damage, which you'll want anyway for them to benefit from Inner Circle, so easy peasy. The second will only allow you to use core champions, and those that are eligible for her current patron selected with Network of Espionage. Depending on your roster, this has the potential to be a little bit rough, but at least you have the core champions to fall back on. The third is actually easier in my opinion than the second, making it so only monsters that have been debuffed can take damage. Using her alone will make this achievable anyway, and if you need some more oomph, just slot some additional debuffers. We have Umberto, and previously Esmeralda from the last event able to be thrown in. And those 3 alone will pretty much guarantee everything will be debuffed. And even then, you could just take Aeon's Artificer's Arsenal specialization for this one to make her debuff multiple enemies at once. Now what about her availability? Like Umberto, she will not be available for the Dexterity Day 1 Trials restriction, but is available for all the rest. Also, she's not naturally available for Vajra, but is for the rest of the patrons. However, her Network of Espionage will occasionally select Vajra, and when it does, she becomes available for everything in Vajra for that week. So overall pretty good availability, with the exception of crazy good patron availability if she's covering that patron for the week. She can fit into a few formation types. She is evil and positional, so usable with Krond and Morduk. Goliath is tied to exotic, so not a bad pick for Ashara. Is a bard, so usable for Black Viper's harsher restriction, while she also has a positional. And like Umberto, primed and perfect for a debuff team, when and if that comes online at some point in the future. She does have some RNG tied to her, with her buffing connected to who is available for her currently selected patron. But there are a lot of champions who qualify for all of them, and plenty of options to branch out with otherwise. So when ranking her, we're talking about a decently buffed up positional, a pre-stack debuffer with good availability, and a niche of patron variant hunting on top of that. Another A- champion. The roster tied to this event is kind of lackluster when it comes to flex slots, but let's take a look. Though that does kind of make it easier for me to make a recommendation, I guess. In this case, we're talking, in my opinion, Vin Ursa, Strongheart, and Freely as the 3 top picks. They are good champions with unique mechanics, some of them considered vital, like Freely increasing favor gains, Strongheart scavenging event tokens and counting as an additional member to affiliations, and Vin Ursa just all around being a solid champion with favored foe mechanics. There are 2 honorable mentions beyond that, starting with Nahara, as she shares a seat with someone that does her speed mechanic better than her, and she doesn't scale well with gear. Her uniqueness comes from the fact she can pull in her affiliation into Strahd variants. But that will only matter if you have some Black Dice Society unlocked already. The other honorable mention would be Deacon, who increases enemy spawn speed. The downside is he's always outclassed in this regard by Whittle, or even potentially Melf if he happens to have that particular speed buff active. He still can be worth the unlock, but then we have Xander, Walnut, and Sergeant Knox left, all of which I just would not recommend. All of them are in need of some love, and are only useful in filling out your roster if you absolutely need to unlock more people. It's likely you won't be using any of them in any real formations without reworks, and would be last picks for filling up restricted runs, and they all just don't scale well. But hey, thanks for dropping in. Slap that like, sub, and bell, check the description to follow me on Twitter, join the Tyredack community Discord, and check me out on Twitch. I'm probably live right now. At any rate, the most important thing you should do, you should know it by now, is have a hell of a time out there, champion.